All right, now we're going to go ahead and set up the brake cable and housing. In the previous videos, we've already cleaned up the shift levers and brake levers and re-greased them. Same thing with the brakes, pulled them off and greased them and cleaned them and roughly set in new pads. So now we're going to set the cable and housing, then we'll do the final setup. I like to just go ahead and take an old piece of housing and just sort of hold it up to try and get an idea. So with the noodle, this piece looks like it'd be way too long. I'm gonna shorten it up about 3.5 inches. So I just went ahead and I opened up the cable and housing kit I got. The brake housing is just one continuous long 7-8 foot piece. So I'm just gonna hold this piece up minus about that 3.5-4 inches, bring it down, and then chop it to length. Go ahead and use some side cutters. These are the ones I got from the little bike stand garage sale the other day. Just sort of thrown in. I have a few pairs. I always grab these when I see them because they get annoying and go bad. Try and squeeze in between, so I'm just mash it. Oh, these ones are a little dull. So I cut this end, and you can kind of see it's sort of mashed in there. I'm going to try and clean it up. Trying to get this cable end to be as flat as possible and not have any jagged metal edges poking through. I got it fairly cleaned up, no big metal in the way. Got my little pokey tool here to go ahead and open it up. I can really kind of see inside there. A little bit of black plastic in the way. A little bit of a rough metal edge from where we trimmed it. Now, if I had a shop or more room, I'd have a bench grinder. You can just go bzz, bzz, bzz into the bench grinder, clean this right up, get it nice and flat. I don't, so we're going to use a file. So we're just trying to get this thing kind of as flat and clean as possible without this jagged piece of metal sticking inside the hole where it's going to rub on the cable. Cause a bunch of friction and problems. Nice and flat so that it doesn't just mash into the ferrule. So when you go and squeeze the levers, it just gets squishy and mushy and gross. But nice and firm. People think cables stretch. Maybe it's true a little bit, but mostly it's just the housing seating and things getting mashed and deformed and no bueno. Close enough. Just double check the factory side, make sure it's about the same, nice and clean, open hole, nice and flat. Gonna go ahead and put a little metal cap or a ferrule on each end, make sure it's really pushed down on there. Sometimes they're really tight, I'll tap them on a bench. And basically use these on all brake stuff all the time as much as possible. Unless the weird bike has a weird frame that the little braze-ons or whatever little ends these sink into, old brake levers just don't fit ferrules. That does happen. One side goes on the brake, the other side goes over here. Just going to set it there for now. Now originally these had a little V-brake noodle with a power adjuster on them, like an anti-lock brake kind of thing. They're junk, they don't work, no one likes them, everyone throws them away, it's never been an issue. So I found every old V-brake noodle I have, I'm going to mix and match parts to make something that fits. So here's a complete V-brake noodle. It's kind of a normal one. I think they're like, I think these ones are 90 degrees. And it is going to take this housing with ferrule on this side. See, it doesn't take a ferrule. This might be made just for the housing, just to go right on in there. I never like that. Here's a different one, and it definitely needs the ferrule. So what are you going to do? So no ferrule, clip that guy right in. It clips into this little noodly bridge. This thing has a little slot in the top, so it's like a quick release. So when you need to go pull it apart, you can just squeeze it together. My angle is always so much better than your guys' angle. We got a little rubber boot. That it sort of pops on to keep water and dirt and junk out. On these brake cable and housing kits, the cables come in 2 different lengths, a front and a rear, so make sure you grab the shorter one for the front. Otherwise, when you go to do the rear, you'll be sad because your little housing, your little cable won't be long enough. So here's the end on this one. Here's the end on this one. It also comes double-sided for a flat bar style lever and a road style lever. So we're going to cut the road style lever off because these take the flat bar barrel style. I'm going to go ahead and just pop this guy down. And the little barrel has a little quick release area, so slide right in. Slide right up. We'll find the slots. There's the slots on these levers and line them all up. Make sure they're lined up and smooth. You saw it try to stick there for a second, trying to trick us to thinking it's tight when it's really not. And then when you go and set up the brakes, it'll just pop tight and you'll have a bunch of slack. Now on old style housing or vintage housing or stuff, sometimes you should lube these with slick honey. It's like a product made just for bikes. But on this modern housing from these kits, it comes pre-lubed. So you really don't have to worry about greasing these cables yet. Make sure it's nice and free. Pulling it taut up here. Sliding it into our noodle. Make sure it slides through nice and free. So it moves nice and free through our noodle. Pull that all in, make sure it seats all the way in there. Slide the booty on. I'm loosening this pinch bolt, sliding it in. You can see there's already like a little groove in there with some wear from previous cables. You know, you're in the right spot, going the right way. Just kind of pulling it tight with my hand. Tighten this pinch bolt back down. Set it up pretty tight so we know it's going to seat a little bit. Usually there's a little teeny bit of slack. Just gently, low working tension, so not insanely tight, but pretty tight. Oh yeah, it's so tight. So tight you can hear the brakes rubbing. So I'm going to go ahead and let a little bit out so I don't over tighten this, so I don't want to damage this. That's pretty nice. Just a little bit of room, a little bit of lever travel. A little bit of room, little bit of lever travel. So you want the lever to be able to pull, but not come back and hit the grip. You might even want a little bit more than this for leverage, but luckily we have all this extra barrel adjuster we can roll back in. Really shrink it up. We could also make it even looser and tamper with this little screw, which I believe should be the travel screw, which should make this, instead of being all the way out, you can start partially in for smaller hands. So you can adjust this for smaller hands to reach, which probably is a good idea. Let's play with that. I rolled that all the way in, and it bought me, you know, almost a 1/4 inch of hand travel. So not too bad. I'll go ahead and roll the other side all the way in while we're at it, so we don't forget, and why not? Make it a little easier to set up. This is a pretty small bike, so we figure it's going to be pretty small hands. Which means I'm going to loosen this up even more. Loosen it, slide the cable a little bit. Checking the lever. Goes about halfway to the bar. It's not going to hit this, not going to hit the grip. Should be about perfect. We can always tighten it up with a barrel adjuster if need be. I might just snug this down just a little bit more. Call that front pretty awesome. I'm going to take the cable cutter and cut off this excess. With V-brakes, people usually like to leave a few inches and you wrap it sort of behind the spring. And that gives you something to grab onto or play with or whatever. Doing adjustments in the future. Just going to take some old pliers. Put the ferrule in about like that, where it's mostly in. And I'm going to clamp it on. Just squeeze. One good solid squeeze. Put nice little indents and plier teeth marks in that. A lot of people like to do a lot of more trick things, but those things always come loose and fail. I like the plier method. It works great. I'm in. Now, we really take a look at this brake. See the gap on this side's 3 or 4 millimeters. Hard to tell with the tire. Gap on this side is non-existent. So this is where these little screws on the bottom come into play. You tighten these to add spring tension, and they're both all the way in. So I'm going to let this one out a little bit, and that should relieve the spring tension on this side, letting this whole arm move closer to the wheel. And even the gap, and should let the other side move away. So now, I've almost got too much on the other side, so I'm going to let it out just a little bit too. And now we're real even, maybe 3-4 millimeters on each side. Plenty of room. Now I'm going to get in here and take a real close look at these pads and squeeze the lever and really see where they hit. I want to make sure these pads stay in this silver. There's a little bit of black on the rim at the very top. I want to not hit that. I definitely don't want them to hang off the bottom at all. So right now, this looks perfect. It's completely hiding the silver. I should probably actually move them up like about 1 millimeter. So I'm just going to gently loosen this. I'm using my thumb to push the brake in towards the rim. Using this finger to wiggle the pad up and get it even. It's a long pad. We don't want it to come up and touch the tire in the front or the rear. Nice and even, hiding that silver. Just cinching it up. Really giving it a little bit of, just a little bit. You don't want to strip any hardware or damage anything. Come check the other side and do the same thing by squeezing the brake lever. This one also looks as high as it can go. Without getting up that black, touching the rim. The back's maybe a little higher than the front, so make sure it doesn't move when I tighten it down. Now that is perfect. These brakes are perfect. Even on both sides. They both snap back. They both move real freely. Pads are in the right spot. They still make that V shape. You notice these aren't totally straight up and down. They come in a little bit. So that gives them leverage while they're coming in. If they come totally up and down, or even come in like a reverse V, it means they're going to lose all their leverage and they're not going to brake very well. Now the rear is about the same thing, except for there are cable stops, braze-ons, for the back brake. In 3 spots back here. So we have to cut that housing. There'll be some bare cable, some housing, some bare. Grab this long piece again. And we're going to see how it looks. We're going to stick it up into the lever. Come around into the first stop. But this one's a little bit more important. Because as the bars turn and spin, you can see the housing moving. So it's rubbing up here. If we turn too far and it's too short, it'll get tight on the head tube, cause it to kink or bend like it is here. So we want this kink out. So we want a nice gradual turn where it doesn't get too tight, doesn't pull out of this housing. And ideally it wouldn't rub right here. So I'm going to shorten this up just the tiniest little bit. It's a little too long, which is shocking, because almost everyone in the world sets this stuff up way too short. So it's always getting kinked at the ends, getting bends, doing horrible stuff, especially in the breeder railer. So cut this new piece just about an inch shorter than the old one. Let's see how that looks. Now it's in, you can turn all the way this way, barely touch. Turn all the way this way, nothing's popping out, so it's not too short. This is riding in neutral. There's a nice little gap right here, about an inch. So that is perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and do the back while we're at it. So for this back piece, it follows the tube down and it makes a little loop right here. So we're gonna measure this little loop. So this one should just be a guide. Yep. This side pops right into the braison. There we go. We want a nice gentle arc. It's got too much arc or too little arc. It'll make this bend real tight on the brake cable. Same thing up here. We have a nice gentle arc into this V-brake noodle. I mean, that's probably too much. Let's play with some noodles. So here's another nice normal one. You can see you can kind of see it. It's a little tight bike. So we want this to come up and bend in. Ooh, this little tighter noodle might even be better. I've got a few to play with. Then maybe we can do a little tighter bend. Nice, gentle bends, nothing too dramatic. But this little tight one will put it right into the seat post when the brake closes, so back to this bigger normal one. And that is going to put it out in front of the seat post. Alright, I'm going to cut it about here and use this normal one. So same thing, just measured out this old piece of housing to the new one. Try to wiggle this in, give it a little snip. Looking at my end, make sure it doesn't need any more trimming. Maybe this side a little. Doesn't really want to play along, so probably just need a little more filing. My little dudes, I went ahead and filed and cleaned this guy up and popped the little ferrules in. Stick it on here, stick it in there, run it down through its little home, pop it in there. Now everybody's in their little home just like they should be. And in theory, this will all feel great. It won't know until we put the actual cable through and feel it. Make sure it doesn't get all bindy and tight. If it does, maybe we'll cut a piece a little longer, cut a piece a little shorter. Just file on these fronts. Files only cut in one direction, the pushing direction. So he's rubbing it back and forth. All you're really doing is dulling your file. So I'm sort of grinding this guy against the file because it's easier than moving the file, but you can do both. A little double action. Nice and flat. Pokey tool to make sure it's nice and clean. Pushing some ferrules on. Go on. Cool, cool, cool. Running it on the inside into the brake lever. Snipping a little mushroom off of this side. Then we're lining this guy back up. Coming through the slot. And if you got old levers without slots, it just means you don't get to do it quite as easy. You just gotta fish all the way through the hard way. And that's fine too. Run, run, run. We got the cable coming through. Set it into the correct braze-on the top tube. Slide a little rubber donut up it. This will keep it from ting, ting, tinging. Or if you didn't have this, it's always tinging. You go over bumps and hit slaps. Just to shut it up. Sliding it through the second piece. I'm going to put this back in this little braze-on because I want to feel that cable go through. Feel it run through this loop and see if it gets real tight or terrible. Which maybe it is. It didn't like up here. We're going to try it again. Putting this into the little V-brake noodle. Is not happy. That's kind of normal when you're setting them up. It really only matters once it's already all set up. Wow, does not want to slide through this V-brake noodle at all. Pull it through. Oh, it could be the V-brake noodle itself feels a little tight on the inside. Ooh, it did. It jammed up this cable and mangled it. It's the problem with these split end ones. If you buy them from a shop, they come with only one side, and this other side's brazed closed, so you can't get it to jam up like a little spring. So we have to trim that past this jammer and hope it's still tight enough, or long enough. See what's going on. I fish through from the other side. See how it feels. Yeah, it's not into it. Okay, now it goes through. Try it again, just making sure there's no blockage or obstacles. Okay. Whatever was in there causing it to be tight is out. Sliding all this stuff back into place the hard way. Make sure everything's seated. And pull it tight with my fingers and grab the lever and squeeze to make sure there's no friction. It's actually really shockingly smooth, so that's good. It went in hard. Thought it might have been all mangled. Thought we might have had to change this, but these real gentle bends. Not too huge of a loop, not right angles. Usually do the trick. Sometimes if something's a jerk and it wants to move as you brake and stop all the time, the bike wiggles, it'll tuck and tuck and tuck and tuck and make this one way too tight and this one way too big. So a trick for that is some electrical tape. You can make a little donut, sort of like these little cable dudes. Make a little donut around this piece of housing, and that'll hit the stop and not let it slide through this full stop. But I don't anticipate that on this one, so we're going to give it a shot. Do the same thing we did on the front. We're just going to put it in here. Oh, almost forgot that little dumb rubber boot you don't need. Slide on the little dumb rubber boot you don't need. It may or may not keep any moisture or dirt out. Probably doesn't. It doesn't matter at all. Oh, great. This one does not want to fit. I'm going to try a different little rubber boot. See if this one wants to fit. Huh. Nope, it doesn't care either. So we're going to skip the rubber boot on the back. They're dumb. They don't do anything. It doesn't matter. I'm going to set it up. Pinching with my hand. You can use a tool for this, but you really don't need one, like the third or fourth hand tool. I'm just going to pull it tight. So let's tie the left side of the brake. Push the right side with my hand. Give it a little bit of slack, because I know it's going to be way too tight. Just gently, barely snug it up. And grab that brake lever and feel. Oh! You can definitely feel a little bit of that friction in this system now. It's not nearly as nice as the front side. These get loosened anyway, so I'm going to loosen this up. I'm going to drop a little bit of lube down in here. Even though the housing's new, this noodle is being a bit of a brat. Just going to slide it down and just drop a couple of drops. Not so much that it runs all over the floor. Just a couple of drops. Sort of pulling the cable through to help lube it. Might do one more just for fun. Just down low so I can really pull it through and make sure it's on that cable. Might even drop an extra one down here. On tune-ups, this is what I do. I come around a little chain lube and drop it down inside all the housing. Make it feel as smooth as possible. Okay, that's what we can do for this little tight situation. We're going to plug it all back in. Pull this guy too tight. Loosen it up a little bit. Tighten her down just a little. Squeeze that lever. Ooh, it's a little smoother. And I'm looking at the lever and how much it travels up towards the bar. I'm trying to get them both about the same. It's a little squishier. I've got a little more travel, so I'm going to tighten this up a little bit. Just loosening it, pulling the cable a little bit tighter, tightening it. That is too much, but lots in the barrel adjuster, so I'll roll that back in. It's pretty good. I'm going to tighten it down. Once we stretch the cables, really reef on these brakes. It's a little tight. Once we really reef on these brakes and get them super tight and get them all settled in and stuff, it might, you know, one or both of them might loosen up, and one might not, one might, so we might play with the barrel adjusters to make them just feel real even. So we got the cable, I'm looping it around this little brake spring so it sticks out. Giving it a little cut so it still sticks out a few inches, we can tuck it out of the way. Loading up this cable tip into these giant channel locky pliers. There you can see. Slide it straight on all the way in, giving it one good solid squeeze. I see guys always squeeze them and try and come around and squeeze them the other side, and all it does is remake them round so they fall right off. Now we're going to do the same thing on the back brakes as we did on the front, where we center the pads, make sure they're high enough, not too high, make sure they're all centered and even. Oh yeah, they need some adjusting. First thing we're going to do is look at how it hits when we push it in. See, it's almost all the way up into the black, still covering all the silver. It's hitting really even on the rims, not too far in, not too far out. With BB hardware, you can really tweak these guys around. And sometimes when the brake squeals, especially on cantilevers, you really got to tweak the angle the pad hits the rim to get that squeal out. When I do something like that, I always do them one at a time. People want to go adjust all of them, test ride one at a time, test ride one at a time, test ride. Is it worse? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it better? Switch to the other side. Is it worse? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it better? So I like where this is sitting. I like everything about it. So this guy gonna get the tighten down. The other side, the hard to reach side, it's not looking so hot. The pad's way too low in the front, way too high in the back. Looks like it's hitting the rim at a terrible angle where the back's hitting first. Loosen it up just a little. Push with my whole hand on the tool, pushing towards the tire. So hold everything tight. Wiggle, 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 push till everything looks pretty straight and flat. Brake pad's not hanging off the top or the bottom. That might be a lie. Oh man. No way to see this pad. I might do a little final adjustment on the ground, which I always do anyways. Terrible. Moving all over the place. It's weird, the tight one you can't see, you can't get behind. It's the one that moves. That's why it's still not super tight. To sort of push it up to make it even again, make sure it's hitting the rim just the way I want. Not sticking up, not sticking down. Checking again for the spacing. So there's 2 or 3 millimeters on this side. About the same on the other side. Pulling the lever slowly to make sure both brake pads touch at the same time. And they do more or less. I'll let this side out just a little bit. I think it's hitting a little. Nice. And pretty close is pretty good. I mean, most wheels aren't expected to be more than 2 or 3 millimeters within true, so you want 2 or 3 millimeters on each side so the wheel's not constantly rubbing and hitting the pad when it goes around the one high spot. And it looks real nice. And that is setting up the brakes. Should be good to go. We'll do our final double checks at the very end. Make sure it's tight and adjusted right when we're on the ground and test riding it, make sure there's no squeals. Next video will be the derailleurs coming right now.